Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Venngage. Venngage is a design platform that isn't just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but takes it up a notch with built-in accessibility features. Whether you're looking to run an accessibility check on your designs or export them in the PDF UA format, Venngage has you covered. So head on over to www.venngage.com, that's VENNGAGE.com, and check them out. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am director of media productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and find out more information about it. How you doing, Chad?
Doing well. Winter has arrived in the Northeast.
I was checking the forecast for Accessing Higher Ground because we're, by the time this airs, we will be at Accessing Higher Ground. And we're getting there just before the cold snap. So it's going to be in the 60s and 70s for a couple of days. And then Saturday, 43.
Really not bad. I mean, this morning here, it was 28 degrees. Ooh. So it's winter has definitely arrived. Do you own a coat, Dax?
I do actually in California.
Okay.
It does rain
sure.
and it gets cold, but cold for us is like 45 is like freezing at night, No, in fact, I have to paint the koi pond today. I am at the point where the inside's all finished and ready to go. I have to put the glass on, but before I put the glass on, I have to paint it with this black waterproofing stuff to add the last membrane before I do all the electrical. So the last parts are just the electrical and then inspection. And then hopefully in December, I'll be filling it with water. So I've got to get all that done before the weather starts to turn, or I'm never going to get it done.
How are you going to fill that up? Are you just going to use your faucet?
Yeah, I actually called the water company and they said you just need 2 hose. Just take your front and back hose and dump it in there and it'll take 2 or 3 days. And usually he said most people fill up their pool in a couple of days. I was surprised. So, yeah.
In our community, it's very common. They will call the fire department.
Oh, wow.
And the fire department will come out with a pumper truck. And
that'd be great.
And so I don't know. It might be worth making a phone call.
I called and they were like not interested. I called 2 different water companies. That's where I first went. Is I called the 2 different water companies. They're like, call the city because I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter. You can use your hose. The only reason you need a pump truck is if you want it filled in an hour, right? And it was going to cost me like $500 a load. So and I would need 3 loads. So it's not cost effective for sure.
Your water bill will be a little high for that month, but
not too bad. Not too bad. I know that a lot of people have expressed interest in keep continuing hearing about the koi pond. But for those of you who are not in the koi pond camp, sorry, I'll put a cue point in this video so you can cue point right to our
jump
our
to
content.
the good stuff.
Well, and the good stuff today, thank you so much for being here. Eugene from Venngage has graced us once again with his presence. Thank you so much for being here, Eugene.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to chatting again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Your in LinkedIn is fire. I don't know if you personally are doing your LinkedIn social media, but well done, man. I follow all your posts, and this is not. I'm not trying to suck up to the guest host, but all the stuff you've been posting lately has been really good content, and I really enjoy it's not just cannon fodder. It's not just everybody should use accessibility and it's real meaningful stuff. So thanks a lot for that great content.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Glad you're enjoying it. The LinkedIn thing is sort of an interesting experiment. I wasn't very active on LinkedIn outside of recruiting, and I kind of got into it, and I do enjoy it now. Not, and it is me for the most part. It is
Good.
me. I do get some support with some research, but for the most part, it's 95% me, I would say. Yeah, and I do my own graphics, so that was the other thing. It does help that I am the CEO of a design tool, so I do all
I was
my
going to ask,
graphics.
what tool are you using to do those graphics with there, Eugene?
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that I've just noticed that, hey, I'm probably one of the few people creating actually thumbnails on almost not every post, but on a lot of posts.
Yeah,
and it's because I can do it very quickly, because I'm so used to using Venngage to do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
no,
cool.
and it's great interactivity. Usually your posts are, more than 20 comments. This last one got 21 reposts, which is really great metric. Which was on the pie chart. We talked about this last time you were on about is there such a thing as too much accessibility?
Right.
And that which is a little bit of a segue to our topics today. And I think that what we've kind of talked a little bit about off air to discuss is really about the questions that people ask related to the level of effort for accessibility, right? Because it's all this stuff that we do, right, Chad? I mean, there's so many things that we have to account for. You and I are getting ready to put on a 2-day pre-conference lab at Accessing Higher Ground, just with an amazing amount of information. And I can't imagine someone just starting out how they feel about all these new things that they now have to do.
Well, I think you have to approach it like you approach anything else that you care about, right? You don't learn how to, we just used the analogy of, a carpenter, right? You don't learn how to be a carpenter over a weekend, right?
Right.
That knowledge is the length of the career. You know what I mean? You're always learning new things. And the same thing applies to what we do, Dax. I mean, I am constantly learning new stuff,
Yep.
and you and I are constantly bouncing ideas back and forth about like what we think could be a better solution, and what we think, could help us. And so I think, everybody, who's interested in accessibility just needs to understand that it's a process.
Right.
It's not something that you're not gonna watch. You're not gonna watch my LinkedIn learning course over the weekend and go to work on Monday an expert. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you it's going to happen, but it's not.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because we just got an email on our from our website from someone literally saying just about that same thing. And you can't see how long this is, but this is an entire story about this person. And they're a 50 to 60 person marketing firm, and they're just starting to implement accessibility, and they're asking questions about how long will it take, and how do I convince my supervisors that I need certain tools. And she says, I'm new to this myself, and being a senior graphic designer in our team, I've listened to LinkedIn learning webinars by your colleague Chad Chilius, and also viewed some Adobe Acrobat sessions by Rob Haverty. My question is, knowing this will probably sound naive, but how long does it take to implement an accessibility process into a company's workflow? Right? That's exactly what we're talking about. It's that struggle, right, Eugene? And it really starts with some of the best tools, using the right tools for the job.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, you can train. I think training is always one of those things that everyone wants to say, hey, we'll just train everybody. But if you don't have the right tools and the right infrastructure and processes, it's probably not going to work, right? So.
Yeah, no, yeah. And Chad, we always teach what's the best way to implement an accessibility into your organization.
Yeah,
top down, right? Top down,
absolutely. And it's somewhat mind-boggling to me that we get so many questions like what you just read, Dax, about or from the end user,
right?
And what boggles my mind is they're trying to convince their bosses that this is important.
Right.
And you would think it would be the opposite. You would think it would come from top down. Like people up at the top would be looking at this and being like, oh, wow, accessibility is becoming a really important thing. we should really implement that, and then kind of pushing it down to the end users. But
Right.
instead, it's flip-flopped, right? It's
Right.
the end users that are seeing the value and then trying to figure out how to convince their bosses that this is valuable. And
Well,
it's just really interesting.
those content creators at the end, right? We're really talking about the content creators. So as those content creators are learning, hey, there's this thing, accessibility, I've got to do it. And most of them honestly are designing in tools. Maybe they're using Word, or maybe they're using PowerPoint. Literally, I have a 31-page manual that's going with me to Accessing Higher Ground on PowerPoint, and the struggles of how do I make a PowerPoint document accessible. In fact, I'm on an email thread, and someone just said, hey, I'm struggling in PowerPoint because when I adjust the reading order, they've got this great new panel called the reading order panel. I adjust the reading order, but then it pushes some of the items behind other items and they get hidden. And they said, but if I go into the layer order and I move the layers, it adjusts the reading order. So while they gave us a new panel, they're still tied to one another. So the person was saying, is there something wrong with my program? Because they can't set the reading order independent from the layer order. Now I know Venngage does have the ability, right? It sets the reading order, or you can set the reading order based on how you create, you select the different individual items. Is that right?
Yeah, you can set the tag order. I think that's the correct term. So
Yeah.
not the reading order. So it's still but the tag order, and we're still in the process of syncing up both those orders.
And I think that this person was talking about the tag order,
the
not
tag order.
That reading order tag order conversation. We'll save for a future podcast.
Sure.
But just setting the tags to get them appear in the right order,
right,
in PowerPoint is arduous because it's tied to the Z order, the layer order of the objects. Even though they give you this new panel called the reading order panel, if you're not on Windows, not on the Office 365 for web, or on a Mac, if you're on a PC using a desktop environment, you get this accessibility panel, but it fights itself. So the nice thing about Venngage is, right, you can set the tag order independent from the layer order, correct?
Right. Yep, that's correct.
Awesome.
I actually, want to go deeper into the point that Chad, you made, which was it's top down versus bottoms up, and I think this is one of the things that we are still discovering. There's a lot of users, a lot of people interested in accessible design, creating documents, using our tool that are accessible, but they may not be the buyer. They're not the decision makers.
Right.
And I think unless there's a way to convince the decision maker, we still have this gap that we're trying to resolve before we can get adoption. And obviously for us, we also want to get the sale as well, right? And we've seen people very interested in the product, but it's still a lot of effort to get it up to decision makers.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, we're approached by people and they're like, there's got to be a better way to be able to make these documents accessible. And we're like, well, there is, there's some fantastic products out there that can really streamline this process. And you know what we hear so often? Oh yeah, our company will never buy that.
Yeah. Which is amazing.
We get that all the time, right? They're like, oh, our company would never buy that.
We don't have budget for that.
Yeah, or we don't have budget for that. And I'm like, it's it's like having a Formula One race team and you have a budget of $1,000. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do it. So you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? If you want it to be easier, you need to leverage some products that'll help you to do that. Otherwise, you have to take the arduous approach, and it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it's going to be harder. But if you leverage the proper tools, it makes it quicker. It's, the ROI is so easy to justify because what you pay for that product will pay you back in spades, moving forward. So it's not really hard to convince them that it's needed. It's just, the company chooses, or at least based on what we're hearing, the company is saying like, no, we're not going to spend any extra money, on this. And that's
Well,
unfortunate.
Well, I find it interesting, that a lot of this has to do with understanding what makes a document accessible, right? People think that you just create a table in Word or InDesign and it just spits out an accessible table. And, I use tables as an example because I think it's one of the bigger things that people struggle with in making a table accessible. And, Eugene, not to talk about a different product on your podcast, but it is a great example of where Access PDF's table editor really shines in that this tool, when Chad and I first saw this tool, not unlike Venngage, when we saw Venngage, we had the same reaction, but we saw the table editor in Access PDF. You just click on the cells to set the association and it saves hours. I mean, I have spent nights all night long working on tables. This tool would have taken me 5 minutes or less. And it's that type of thing. How do you convince your boss that that's worth it? Because to them, they're like, it's just billable hours. You'll figure it out, right? Go watch a YouTube video and, and you'll get it. We don't need to buy another tool.
Well, in modern age, everybody wants software to just be discoverable. Right. They want software. You just kind of poke around in it and you can figure it out. And, unfortunately, document accessibility is not like that, right? It requires a level of knowledge. One of the more frustrating things for me that I've had happen many, many times, I think you have too, Dax. Excuse me. I've had people say, my company will not pay for training, but I need this training. And so I'm going to pay for this out of my own pocket.
Oh yeah.
That is horrible to me. That just, it is so frustrating. And, many times I'll try to accommodate those people and try to help them any way I can.
Well, I'm going to help you for a second, Chad,
please.
and let you take a second to get some water. Poor guy. Well, Eugene, piggybacking on Chad's statement, one of the nice things about Venngage, and I think this is something that both Chad and I actually really enjoyed, was the ability to learn about accessibility while designing the document. I think you guys really took a discoverable approach of how to do that, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of our design sort of principles, was that we wanted there was an educational part of the user interface that we wanted to do, because we knew from our own survey of our user base that a lot of people didn't know, I would say, anything about accessibility. The vast majority. And we were putting in these nudges for you to do things like check your color contrast. And as you export, asking you questions like, have you checked to see if it's accessible? So we felt like we can't just expect people to use features of something they don't understand, right? So the educational part was important. And we are seeing people using more and more. So we do track the usage of the accessibility checker and all the accessibility features. How many times people click on it? Do they actually go in and check and use the accessibility feature? The numbers, the percentage of users using it is still small,
right,
compared to but it is growing, and the ones that use it, the ones that actually complete the checker is growing, which is great. So
yeah, well, it like we said, Chad, we've mentioned this many times on the podcast that most people think accessibility is this new thing that everybody's just now getting on but it's been around since 2009 and before. And so, the idea that it's sad and good at the same time. Sad that we're just now getting people to kind of build momentum, but good that we're getting people to build momentum, because some accessibility is better than no accessibility, right, Chad?
Absolutely. You and I say that all the time, and I think accessibility in general can be overwhelming to people, right?
For sure.
I mean, if you look at it in a broad view, you're like, oh my goodness, right? Like, how am I ever going to know all of this stuff? And what you and I always say, Dax, is just take baby steps, right? You don't have to become an expert overnight. Just learn fundamentals. Learn fundamental things that can affect your document or website significantly, and then build upon that, right? Because like we said, some accessibility is better than no accessibility. So even if you do the core components, you're going to have success, right? Your document's going to be more accessible than it was before you started doing this.
Well, and Eugene, your the Venngage platform really makes that possible, because when you talk about those core things, we're really talking about heading levels and heading structure. We're talking about obviously proper tags and being able to tag things the way they should be in the right order, and then alt text. And if you can do those three things, you're 75% or more the way there, right? And I'd love to talk a little bit more about the generative alt text that Venngage has built into their program.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I think to your point, we most of our users are, I would say, very different from a lot of like users who use accessibility products, because those are very specific to people who know about accessibility. Most of our users don't know a lot about accessibility. So
sure,
by default, so our goal was just by default, we wanted, whether you cared or know about accessibility or not, by default, whatever you produce, whatever you create and export, that content will be a lot more accessible than if you were using some other tool. And to your point, yes, there's and to your point, it's only a few things that you have to look out for, right? Like the alt text, some color contrasting, so the headings and the tags. And if you just follow the template, and we have accessible templates, you just kind of replace things and edit a template. For the most part, it will be 75-80% accessible. And then if you actually took the effort to address the issues that we flag in the checker, you could get up a lot higher than that. And the alt text generator is one of those features that we thought, it is kind of a pain writing alt text, especially if you want to write alt text for like a chart or some very complicated image or diagram or visual. So, we know it ourselves, because we've been writing alt text manually, and now you can integrate with these AI APIs, ChatGPT. There's a whole bunch,
right?
And they do a fairly good job to, I tested the latest version of ChatGPT, and it does an incredible job in generating alt text.
Yeah,
shockingly incredible job. So.
Well, I had reached out to you, Eugene, because there's a lot of times, when my wife and I are traveling, and she'll be driving and I'll be working on my laptop in the passenger seat, right? And I was working on a project, and I had to write alternate text for a bunch of images, right? And my wife saw me doing this, and she's like, I feel like AI could be able to do that, really easily. And my initial response to her was, yeah, but they all suck. You know what I mean? They all absolutely, I'm not even going to mention names, right? But most of them just suck. But as it came out of my mouth, I thought of Venngage. So I took one of the photos and I uploaded it to Venngage, and I think you have to drop it on the page before you can write out. But so I dropped it on the page, and I had it auto generate alt text. I was blown away. Because I'm used to getting image of sunglasses for most of my photos, right? And this was like accurate to like a very high degree. I'm like, I could actually use this. Like, it was legitimately accurate, So, and I had emailed you, Eugene, and I'm like, hey, is there any way I could batch upload a bunch of photos? Like, that's where my brain went, and Eugene's like, well, we don't have that yet, but so, but hopefully I put a bug in Eugene's ear that maybe that's something they can add in the future.
Well, and Eugene, I don't know if you want to spill this beans, and if you don't, that's totally okay. But are you using ChatGPT 4? I know a couple weeks ago you had made a post regarding these two boys kind of face to face, kind of arguing, giving each other the business,
Right.
and how ChatGPT did. Was that just kind of a test to kind of say, hey, we might be utilizing this API to help write our alt text?
Yeah, so we are, I think, I mean, I can share it. I don't think that's a secret. I
Don't
think
mean to
we
put it in
are,
the spot.
yeah. No, we're currently using the not 4, but 3.5.
Gotcha.
And I mean, it's just a matter of time. We're still, testing for, we haven't integrated the latest version of ChatGPT yet, but we will very soon. But it still does a really good job. 3.5 still does a great job. So
I'm still on the free
You
version.
you own the company, Eugene. You can say whatever you want.
yeah. I can say whatever I want.
Eugene's like, I think I could say this. I'm like, you own the company. You can say whatever you want.
I can say whatever. But I'll tell you, the alt text generation thing, it does. I was talking to a user today, and she was saying, "Oh, right now it does require you to click a button to auto generate the text,
Right.
And if we wanted proper guardrails, why don't just make it automatic and then just prompt the user every time they put an image on the canvas on the page to say like, hey, we generated alt text. Like, does this look good? If it looks good, you just click on the image, click on OK. And if it doesn't, you can edit it because there are some images. Context sometimes is important in image descriptions. So we're thinking of even doing stuff like that where we have additional guardrails that it just uploads it. You just need to look at the generated text, and then you can just say okay, and then you're good to go. So it's even less. So this would even help people who don't even know what alt text is, because we would auto generate it and we would just ask them.
Well, I think you're taking a really interesting approach, because we always say that accessibility will always be a series of automated tools and manual checks. And what you're doing is really smart, because it is allowing the user to take advantage of the accessibility tool while remaining connected to it and still having that human interaction. For many years, I guess it's probably been 3 years or so, maybe more, Word has used automatic alt text. It has had this generative alt text. Only in recent, like within the last few months, recently, their Microsoft checker now tells you, when you run the accessibility checker, it says, hey, there are 3 images in this document that we've generated alt text for. Go look at it and make sure it's okay. Right. Before, it would just do it. And if you didn't catch it, or like you said, to your point, if you didn't know about it, even know that it was a thing, your document could export with something very, not what it was intended to be. So,
Yeah. And I don't know if they've integrated ChatGPT. I mean, they must have, because they're basically funded. Because I've used the word alt text generated before, and it was terrible.
It's always terrible. It's still terrible, to be honest with you. But at least it warns you that it tried.
Right.
And what blows me away, and I guess part of the reason why you're able to do this, Eugene, is because your company is so nimble. Right? I mean, you're not a huge company, right? I mean, I don't know how many employees you have, but like, I just feel like because you're smaller and more nimble, you're able to incorporate this. I don't want to say that it's easy for you, right? But I'm just going to say, like, fairly easily, you're able to integrate this into your product. It's just kind of mind blowing that these giant companies like Adobe and Microsoft and other companies as well are unable to make this happen. And so I think it really says a lot about your organization and how you've implemented this, and it's a super useful tool for people, because what we have in Microsoft Word is honestly unusable, in my opinion.
Well, speaking of unusable, I want to everybody listening to this podcast right now, you need to do something for us. Acrobat has a bug right now, in that when you try to export from Word to PDF. There is, in the latest release, it says Microsoft's Acrobat puts the figure in the wrong place. So when you have a figure inside of Word and you generate a PDF using the Acrobat ribbon, it will no longer honor the right reading order. It just dumps it in somewhere random. And this was a bug they fixed early on, but has since come back. And Bevy Chagnon had reported this, and I shared it in our Facebook group. It has 25 votes right now, I think. But please go on to either our Facebook group, PDF Accessibility, or to the acrobat.uservoice.com and look up PDF Maker, and you'll see the recent thread. But Chad, you talk about big companies not being able to pivot quickly. It's so frustrating. Somebody wrote a comment in that the bug saying, look, Adobe, please fix this. We want to be able to keep using PDF, but if you can't make the tool work correctly, companies are going to start outlawing the use of PDFs. And we're seeing that a lot in Canada and in the UK, where there's this very anti-PDF sentiment that is just really prevalent.
Well, and I think in some ways it's because of things like this, right? You know what I mean? It's because of these barriers that are being, I don't want to say these companies are putting up the barriers, but they're producing software that contains a barrier that is a pretty significant problem, right?
Yep.
I mean, really, I'm gonna call out Adobe on this one. Footnotes and endnotes out of Adobe InDesign are currently broken, and they've been broken for 4 years, right? And so every time I make a PDF that has footnotes or endnotes, I got to go in and fix them to make them compliant.
Right.
4 years, guys. 4 years.
And I will tell you, when I told them at Adobe, when I was at Adobe Max, I mentioned some of the things that have been broken for quite a long time. Their answer was, we're working on EPUBs right now. We don't have time for that. And I was just like, okay.
Okay, I'll keep waiting.
Wait, 4 years? 2 years? Some of these things have been broken. Alt text has been broken on hyperlinks for a lot, at least a couple of years.
Yeah. And I reached out to so Eugene, like companies like yours, I love, because sometimes I could go to like you and be like, hey, could you fix this problem for me? You know what I mean? Right, and so one of the products that we use is called Made to Tag. And I approached them about fixing the footnote endnote problem. And their conundrum is, but if we fix it and then Adobe finally fixes the problem, our product is going to break again. So they even don't really want to chase this rabbit down the hole, because it's a never-ending battle, and it's just unfortunate,
Well, I gotta believe, as someone who's done a little PHP and WordPress kind of hacking, in the hacking my own website to make things do what they need to do, it's really easy to comment out lines of code and to create modules that can be implemented and disabled at a moment's notice. It would be easy for any company to, relatively easy, I would say, to write software or write a new fix that they could then turn off later on if Adobe decided to fix it. But yeah, I mean, it's a struggle, right? So, Eugene, I was thinking about something while you were talking earlier about how do I convince my boss? What a great opportunity for Venngage to come up with some kind of like one sheet or letter or something that would talk about what Venngage can do to help increase the productivity of the content creator. Because one of the things that I always hear is, how do I balance the workload between getting my job done, getting the content out, and making it accessible? So, I'll throw down the gauntlet for you and say, hey, that might be a great marketing area to go and create that document. But on that topic, how do you balance the workload, right? I mean, that really is a big question for a lot of people. And I think on the surface, what it really boils down to is exactly what you said at the beginning. It starts with training and getting the right training together and understanding how to use the right tools, right? And being able to integrate accessibility into your workflow. So you have the color palette set up. You understand that what images need alt text. You put together the content in a way where accessibility is just that little bit that kind of adds on rather than this behemoth that derails your project.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. I will definitely get my marketing team to create content around that. I mean, it's something that we are facing too. It's, we get the end user who loves our tool, and then now they have to bring it up to their bosses and their directors and managers and try and convince them. And and that's pretty hard, because a lot of times if they don't have a mandate, or if they don't have a compliance sort of a mandate to say you need to make everything accessible, it's just one of like 50 things they probably have to deal with. And I think that is the challenge for a lot of the end users, a lot of people who are interested in accessibility, but are not necessarily the buyers or the decision makers on the tools and the infrastructures and all of that stuff.
So going back to balancing the workload, right?
Right.
How does Venngage help make accessibility just that little bit you add on versus this entire process that can derail your timeline?
Yeah, so I think the good thing that the main value that Venngage allows you to do is, we help any content creator just by default make their documents or their designs more accessible, because we have guardrails in the software, right? Every time you're doing something, we're nudging you towards accessibility by default. So you go from like a by default not accessible, and that requires remediation and a lot of fixes, to by default mostly accessible that may or may not require some fixing. So you by default go from like 0% to like 75 to 80% accessible. And I think that's a lot. I mean, that's where you would balance hey, we got to educate and convince everybody and on the same time deal with all the other stuff that we have to do.
Well, Chad, you and I talk about this all the time, the legal aspect of accessibility, right? And what people will or won't sue you for. And now you and I are not attorneys, and, we're not here to give anybody legal advice, but I will tell you the likelihood that you're going to get sued over something that's mostly accessible versus something with no tags available is substantially lower, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly if you open up a document, right, and JAWS or NVDA or text to speech software is unable to read the document at all, there's no barrier more significant than that, right? I mean, that's really where one of the major problems comes in. And you and I have also talked about, Dax, the fact that with very little effort, you can get tags in your document that at the very bare minimum will be read by assistive technology, right? Maybe you didn't do it 100% correctly. Maybe headings are not, defined, but if it's tagged, it will be read, right? And that's huge. That's a huge thing that you've overcome, right? That can help to avoid situations where people are unable to read that content. And that's really where you have to be concerned. Now, again, we're not attorneys, Dax, so I don't know how many people are like, oh, these headings are not defined in this document. I really find it hard to believe that, that they can make a case for that, because the content is accessible. But again, not an attorney, although I play one on TV.
Well, it's what's to kind of wrap this up, Eugene, we really love your product. I know this, we've focused on that a lot, this program, and I want our users to know, guys, we're not just, this is not a play to pay kind of situation. We really do value the Venngage tool. And we really think it's a great way for someone who's just trying to get into accessibility and understand what it is, to get their feet wet and really start creating content. And Eugene, as you say, create accessible content without really having to know much about accessibility. And I think that's just such a huge bonus for people who are struggling right now. So, we're looking forward to seeing you at Accessing Higher Ground, which in fact, when this episode airs, we will be at Accessing Higher Ground on Tuesday. So probably, maybe we'll sit down and listen to the podcast together and laugh about our flubs. Yeah. But thank you so much for being on the program and for being a sponsor of the Chats Chat podcast. And, we've seen the benefits from several of our end users in our Facebook group and on LinkedIn who've said, look, I've moved our company from Canva and other, Affinity Publisher and other programs to Venngage, and it's really starting to make an impact. And we think there's really positive benefits to using the program. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the nice words. And I'm also looking forward to meeting the both of you in person next week.
Likewise. Yeah,
awesome.
Likewise.
Yeah, well, Eugene, grab dinner or something together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Let's definitely plan on that. I would love that. Well, once again, Eugene, thank you, and thank Venngage for being a sponsor on today's podcast. Again, Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but it takes it up a notch with built-in accessibility features. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.